welcome to Friday Night Frights. And this week is going to be a little different. This is going to be shot mainly like in a podcast style. Kind of like Terror in the Aisles. You should check that podcast out on Scott Slasher World. Links in the bottom, baby. But tonight is the season finale. And who better to have a season finale than have the Horror Man? And the Horror Man was on the very first episode of Friday Night Frights. So I figured, why not just put him in the last one and do it a little different this time, a few different ways. But we're going to talk about just VHS collecting because I know he's a big VHS collector. And instead of talking about a certain movie franchise, last time we talked about Dracula. This time we're talking about collecting VHS. So let's get him on the line right now. Hey, what's going on, Horror Man?
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. It's a rainy night here in West Virginia. How about the weather up your way?
Actually, it's really warm tonight.
Oh, it's warm, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It's been in the 50s here the last few days, and it's been raining like nonstop almost. It's crazy.
We had a little bit of rain, but it's been like usually 80s past few days.
Oh, yeah. It's down into, I think it's only 58, 59 today, but we did have some last week. But on Friday Night Frights, we figured to finish off the first season with the first guest, the Horror Man here. And we're going to talk about collecting VHS, and mainly horror VHS, since it's the Friday Night Frights. How long have you been collecting?
I started collecting, VHS collecting was probably my first collection. That was probably where my addictive habit began when I was young. We had a local video store right down the street that a family friend owned. So we'd be in there like all the time. I mean, it was walking distance from our house growing up, and I'd go in there. I'd burn tapes every couple of days, and lots of times he'd get new stuff in, and he'd give me the old stock. So that's pretty much how my collection began. So I was young.
So it's always been there. How old are you exactly? I forgot.
Oh, that's a mystery.
Oh, no, come on now. Did you grow up in the 80s? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. I'm in my 30s. So,
okay.
I'm in like the perfect age for the, I grew up with VHS basically.
Okay. Well, some people say that they grew up VHS and they're looking at stuff in the late 90s. You know what I mean? And
exactly, yeah.
I hear people say, "Well, I remember the VHS going and hunting down VHS at Blockbuster." And to me, you know, the big boom was in the 80s when the mom and pop shops and stuff, before Blockbuster killed a lot of that, you know what I mean?
Exactly. I was collecting before Blockbuster existed, you know.
Yeah.
We had the mom and pop shops, and I was collecting VHS before you could really afford to buy VHS. Like I said, I would typically get them from the friend who had his shop. Because other than that, you know, VHS tapes were, you know, $60, $70, even $80 sometimes, because they were meant for the rental business. So
yeah, that's crazy. I was just getting ready to say that. I remember a store called Adventureland Videos, the very first one I ever remember in my area where I live. And I remember seeing some tapes that actually had like a price on the actual case that, you know, said 79 or 89. I was like, holy hell, really?
I have a few like that now. It's funny to look back at it and realize that's how much it cost.
Yeah. But, you know, collecting now certain things like the horror collections and stuff, some tapes can actually get a lot higher than that too, though.
Exactly.
So that leads me on to the next question. How much have you ever spent on one VHS? Do you know right off?
Oof. I would say over 100, but under 200.
Oh, Lord. Between 1 and 2, that's kind of pricey there. It must have been something very, very rare there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the shot on video horrors that some of them that didn't make it to DVD or Blu-ray, those can get a bit pricey, and depending on the artwork and the release, I mean, you know how it is.
What does your partner think about you collecting VHS and spending that much money?
My wife's okay with it. I mean, she thinks it's cool. You know, she knows I have that like that, like I said, that addictive collecting personality. So she's okay with it. Usually when the holidays come too, she kind of feeds into the habit, and she'll buy me some tapes on my wish list or whatever. But one thing with me too is I try not to get into like bidding wars on eBay and stuff like that, because number one, I try not to use eBay too much. I'd much rather try to find stuff in the wild or even buy something from a fellow collector. Once I have to go to eBay, it's like, if anything, I'll do a buy it now if the price is good. But once I get into that bidding war, that's when you end up spending a lot more than you anticipate, I think.
Yeah. I like, sometimes if I have gone on eBay, not just for VHS, for anything in general, and I'll just put like a max bid, and that's it. If I get beat right that second when I put that max bid, I'm done. I'm not into trying to go too far and too extreme. I'm like, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. I'm not going to get it. I'm not trying to pay a ton for it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I get like that sometimes, and then other times, I'll put the max bid, and I see I get beat, and I'm like, okay, oh well. And then the day comes when I know it's ending, and I was like, well, maybe if I put in this bid, I'll win. And then before I know it, I'm bidding at the last second and spending more than I wanted to.
What's your favorite thing about collecting VHS?
I was going to ask you the same thing. I think for me, it's a couple different things, but I think overall it's probably the nostalgia factor. I mean, that to me was a huge part of growing up, was going to the video store. I mean, I could literally browse for hours if my parents let me at the time, I could walk down those aisles, especially the horror section, just picking up the same tapes I would pick up, every Friday night, just looking at the cover, looking at the back, and I just really enjoyed doing that, and I think that's a big part of it for me, is sort of bringing back a little bit of that, a little bit of the past, it's that nostalgic feeling. There's something about holding a cassette tape and placing it in a VCR that's better than taking a disc and putting it on like a DVD tray or a Blu-ray tray.
Yeah, well, of course, a lot of people will tell you artwork, is a big thing.
Absolutely.
It's changed so much over the years. Back in the 80s, and they seem to put a lot more time into wanting to sell their product than they do nowadays. You know what I mean?
And that was the thing with VHS. They were able to market these movies that were just plain bad, that people would probably never rent or buy. But because the artwork was so amazing, they would make money on it.
Yeah. It is crazy, but now, in the late 90s, the DVDs came out and Blu-rays, and you see a lot of floating heads and stuff. They put a lot of the main character on there, and back in the day, there was just really, literally like art drawings and stuff, and that's what's cool about, especially the horror stuff. But I mean, there's other things out there that's got it too.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's one thing.
I feel like the horror and like the sex comedies got like some of the best artwork back in VHS days.
Yeah. So I know you're called the Horror Man, but you do collect other types of movies and stuff on VHS too, don't you? Or do you just, whenever you find something special or something, or?
I do, yeah. So I used to collect VHS, obviously growing up. Then I tried to put off collecting DVDs for the longest time, and then I kind of got into the DVDs and the Blu-rays. I laid off on the VHS tapes for years, and then when I started collecting them again, I was like, all right, I'm only going to get VHS tapes of movies that aren't on DVD or Blu-ray. And then it turned into, okay, I'm only going to get those, but I'm also going to get VHS tapes with cool cover art. And then it was like, okay, well, I'm going to get the ones that I rented a lot when I was a kid. And then before I knew it, I was just collecting everything. So now I find myself looking for my favorite movies on VHS just because I want them on VHS.
Yeah. That's kind of the same way with me. There's certain things that you just wanted, and then you see something else. You just wanted something because it was maybe rare or the artwork, and then you come across some cartoon that's not been released on Blu-ray or DVD or anything, and you're like, well, that's cool. I remember that back in the day, and I'm just going to pick it up, especially if you go to a Goodwill and you see it for a quarter or 50 cents,
Exactly, absolutely. And again, my collection's obviously mainly horror, but I got a bunch of the sex comedies, because a lot of those too didn't make it to DVD or Blu-ray. So I try to grab those when I find them, some of the rarer ones, and like you said, the cartoons, the old shows and stuff like that, that I find pretty cool. Again, it adds to that nostalgic factor again, because it's these older cartoons on this old, physical media format, and it's just sort of like a double whammy of nostalgia.
Yeah, I mean, it is cool to, me and Rousey just went out the other day and hit a few Goodwills down the road here into Virginia, and I found I think 15 tapes for like $3.
Wow, nice.
So cheapness is a part of that kind of collecting, but like you said, to get some rarer stuff, you're going to have to put out a little bit more money sometimes. But it is nice to go to a Goodwill, and if you do happen to come across something rare, it's really cool to only pay a quarter or 50 cents for it.
Exactly. Like, earlier, I think it was earlier this year, I was at a Goodwill, and I'm walking by, and there's, they have the bin sometimes on the ground with just random stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking by, and I see this tape that I recognize, and I'm thinking, no way. And it was a copy of The Abomination, which is like an insanely rare, horror VHS. And there it was at Goodwill, so I got it for, whatever it was, 50 cents.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, the other day, all of the other tapes that I got, there wasn't one horror movie in there. But it's a lot of classic movies from the 80s. It was like an 80s day for some reason. I was like, my God, every time I'm finding something, it's something 80s. But the weird thing is, I didn't have none of these movies in my collection on any kind of format. No DVD, Blu-ray, or VHS. And I just happened to pick them up. And they're not really nothing really crazy rare or anything. Some of them had a few good, covers and stuff to it. But I'm kind of getting to where I wanted to get like my favorite 80s movies and stuff on VHS,
Yeah, definitely.
I got the Karate Kid trilogy, and I have Indiana Jones, stuff like that, and I want to get to the Back to the Future ones. I only got the first one. But, exactly. I found myself picking up a copy of Mannequin. I haven't seen that in forever, and I'm like, as cheap as it is, I'm going to go ahead and get it just because I want to watch it again. I haven't seen it in forever.
Same here, yeah. I found those at a thrift store, I think last year. It was Mannequin and then Mannequin 2, and all right, I'm going to grab both of these. And
that's cool.
Why not?
I don't even think I've ever even seen the second one.
It's not that great, but it was there, so I figured might as well get them both together.
Yeah, and when you start collecting, I noticed too, I watch a lot of YouTubers that collect VHS, and some of them, when they first start collecting, and let me know if I'm wrong, but they start buying almost everything they see.
Oh yeah.
And then about a year from then, they start downsizing, saying, well, I only want to buy this, and I only want to buy that, I don't really want this. And it happens because they go to Goodwills and thrift stores, and it's just so cheap, and they get into it, and they're just like, man, I'm guilty of that too. I've done that, and I've sold off a lot of stuff because I just picked it up because it was cheap.
Same here, yeah. Especially, I don't like to leave empty-handed. Sometimes I'll go to the thrift store, and there's maybe something that I don't necessarily need, and I don't want it that much, but it's 50 cents or whatever, let me grab it. And then I end up, with a tape or two that I didn't really need in my collection, and it just adds up over time.
Do you double dip on VHS just because of the artwork on a certain movie or anything?
I guess it depends. If something has like really amazing artwork and I find it, and then it has another cool release or something, then I might do that. Or if the movie's rare and I like to collect VHS, but I obviously like to watch them too. Some people kind of just use them as almost as decoration. So if I can find a really rare tape and then there's a different release that I find, I might buy the second copy as like a watching copy, so I don't have to watch the the rarer release or something like that.
Yeah, I watch them too. It was funny the other night when I brought them movies home. One of them was Footloose, and I haven't seen that in forever. And me and Rousey sat down and watched Footloose, and then right after that, I popped in the Breakfast Club. So that was,
nice.
And watch it, and I haven't seen it forever. And I was just thinking, I can't believe I don't even have this on DVD or anything. I don't know, but it was like I said, it was so cheap.
It's funny that you mentioned the Breakfast Club, because I did the same thing when I bought my copy on VHS. I don't even own that movie on DVD or Blu-ray, and I don't know why. It's a great movie, obviously.
Yeah.
And I found it. I found it on a VHS one day. I was like, damn, I need this for my collection. So I actually only have it on tape.
And some people do that, and then they turn around if they buy like Blu-rays and DVDs. I've seen where they'll buy the DVD or a new Blu-ray came out of it or whatever, and then they'll get rid of the VHS. And I've done that too, but then there's certain ones now, like I said, I want to keep just because they're great classics from the 80s,
Yeah, and to me, this, it's funny because everybody loves, and I do too. Everybody loves, great picture quality and sound and all
Mm.
that, and I do appreciate that, of course, on Blu-ray and all that. But at the same time, there's certain movies for me that I appreciate more in that gritty, look that it has
Mm.
VHS.
Yeah.
Sometimes that extra static and stuff just add the charm to the movies.
Mm.
Those old '80s slashers or the shot on the video horror, or even just '80s comedies and stuff in general.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just adds a certain charm to them, and I enjoy watching it on VHS as opposed to this this bright booming high definition where I can see every little mistake.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of movies, like I said, the really bad horror movies from the 80s. VHS is fine. I mean, but they do put them out now on Blu-ray, like Shout Factory, was it Scream Factory? I meant, and
Yeah.
Arrow and stuff like that. But they're kind of pricey in some ways. I mean, around $25-$30. Some people are really, cheap and they don't want to spend $10 over a Blu-ray. Every once in a while, I picked up some of them. But and they do have the reversible artwork. You can, still see the
Exactly.
old classic artwork, but it's still not the same as the VHS.
Absolutely. And
um,
even with that, something like Friday the 13th, for example, you watch it in Blu-ray, and Kevin Bacon's death scene, you can see how fake it looks. The prosthetic neck. Watch it on VHS, and you don't notice that much.
yeah.
Same thing with there's a movie. I don't know if it's Mortuary. It's an '80s slasher, and
Hmm.
you watch it on VHS, and the killer's supposed to sort of be in the shadows and the darkness, so you can't see who the killer is. You watch it on Blu-ray, you immediately know because it's so bright and the picture was lightened up, so it sort of spoils the movie when you put it in.
Yeah. I own that on VHS, but I haven't got the Blu-ray. I remember it's not been out too long, I don't believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had that one for a little while in my collection. That's got a great cover to it too.
Exactly. Yeah, it does.
What's something like certain things that you're not interested in getting on VHS? Just completely like, yeah, I'm not. There ain't no way. I don't need that on VHS. You know what I mean?
I mean, probably just the more of like the mainstream, big Hollywood movies. So the
Yeah.
stuff that you tend to see all the time at, Goodwill or thrift stores. You see the 8,000 copies of Titanic and Jerry Maguire and all these movies that may be good movies, but I don't need to have them on VHS.
Yeah.
They're just so readily available that it's like, all right, I really don't need to be adding a copy of this to my collection right now. Yeah, it's I would say mainly that sort of thing. Certain comedies I don't necessarily need on VHS. I like the '80s comedies, but once you start getting into like say the late '90s and when you're getting closer to the DVD era, I don't really need movies like that were released in the early 2000s or so on VHS.
Yeah. It's kind of the same way with me on some of that stuff. But like I said, then I don't understand how every Goodwill across America has a copy of Titanic all the time.
It was such a mass release. It just
It's
just
crazy.
So many copies out there.
I think now there's one that I've never seen the widescreen release. I've seen people showing videos where they'll find the widescreen release on VHS, but I've never seen that one. But I always see just the regular release. It's full screen, I guess is what it is.
And that's actually what I have the widescreen from back when the movie was first released on VHS, when everybody was getting a copy, and I actually still have that packed away somewhere, and I had the widescreen. And it seems that the full screen version they made more of those, I think, because in VHS people didn't really like widescreen back then. People thought they were missing out on the picture when they were actually seeing more. So I think people who used to buy VHS would always kind of go for that full frame look. When they saw the widescreen, they would sort of avoid it, I think. So I think that's why they probably made less widescreen copies on tape.
Yeah, I worked with a guy years ago when DVDs first started coming out, and he was like, I can't stand to try to watch a DVD. I guess his wife rented something, or they got it. He just said, I'm not going to the DVDs. He said, because they don't even show the whole picture. And he couldn't figure out the widescreen. I'm like, dude, you're getting more of the picture, but he said, no, they cut their heads off and stuff. And I just could not convince him what widescreen really was. But, and then here years later, I'm still buying VHS too. And I'm thinking, it's something that he really digged at the time. He said he'd never buy DVDs, and now there's Blu-rays and 4Ks and everything else.
Yeah.
Have you got any 4Ks in your collection? I never thought. I don't have none, but
So I have a 4K TV, but I don't actually have a 4K player, and I do have maybe 2 or 3 4Ks, only because, like, I got, like, Halloween 2018, for example. It came out, and the day it was released, it had that with that ultra rare steelbook that came out of Halloween 2018, and it happens to be a 4K and Blu-ray release.
Oh, okay.
So I got that, but I got it to watch the Blu-ray. Also, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, for whatever reason, I have the 4K Blu-ray combo pack just because it was cheap. So I got that instead of just tracking down just the Blu-ray. But I don't actually watch the 4K discs because, like I said, I don't have a 4K player.
I don't really think I'm going to ever get into that. A Blu-ray is probably as high as I want to go, I believe, but you never know.
Exactly. That's what I say now, and then we'll see. And 4K continues. If they continue to pump out 4K like this, who knows?
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that just they can't figure out people buying any kind of Blu-ray, DVD, or anything. I've known people that's like, you can stream this and stream that, and then it's hard to talk to them people too and make them understand why you collect. They say,
I love having it in hand. I like the physical media aspect. I love having it, looking at it displayed, holding it in my hands. But also, I just like knowing the fact that I can watch whatever it is that I own. Streaming services, they may have a lot, but they don't have everything, and stuff disappears. You could be watching something, and all of a sudden, the next day, it's gone.
Yeah. On the VHS side, what's your most rare tape?
That's tough. I would probably say, so I have this tape. It's UFO Abduction. It's the McPherson tape. So it was later released, sort of a different version. It has been since released on DVD and even Blu-ray, I think. But at the time, the McPherson tape was released as it was sort of meant to look like a bootleg tape. Like it was like a family video about an alien abduction. And I have one of the originals that doesn't have artwork. It came in like a white sleeve because these were distributed to local video stores. And before the movie could actually be released in an official format, they actually had printed up artwork for it and everything. The cases, there was a warehouse fire. And they lost all the tapes, they lost all the artwork they had worked on. So it was never officially released in that format. So I actually have one of the originals that, was from the video stores that basically got passed around. And I would have to say that's probably my rarest. How about you?
Well, it used to be a movie that I sold to you, Video Violence, at one time. Now, I don't really have a whole lot that's like that super rare, I guess. That was mainly the main one, I believe, at the time.
That's definitely still one of mine. I got, Video Violence 1, Video Violence 2, and then I also have a copy of Scary Movie, the 1991 Scary Movie. The slasher film and the Halloween haunted attraction. Yeah. And that wasn't officially released on VHS either, so there were only copies that were distributed at the film festival where it was, where it had premiered. So there was just a very limited amount of those that were floating around, and that took me a long time to find a copy, but that's definitely one of the rarest in my collection as well.
Do you know your count on your VHS, how many you actually own, or do you keep count?
Easily over 1,000, but it could be 2, could be more than that.
So you probably have more VHS than you do DVD and Blu-ray together, huh?
Well, between DVD and Blu-ray together, I have about 8 to 10,000.
Wow, really? Okay, so you got so maybe not then. Yeah. So you've been collecting VHS so long. You think you'd have more VHS?
I know. I have just DVD and Blu-ray. There was just so many years of collecting those so vigorously. I think that with VHS again, when we were younger, VHS was so expensive that I didn't get as many back then. I think I'm buying more VHS now than I ever did back then.
Yeah, because like I said, you go to Goodwill, thrift stores, pawn shops, wherever. There's people still sell them, or yard sales, flea markets, stuff like that too.
People just want to get rid of them at this point.
Yeah, and I went to a place here a few years ago that is a little thrift store that had some clothes and stuff and a few other little things, just knickknacks and stuff. And I noticed when I walked in, there's a rack of DVDs and stuff, and I'm looking through them, and she's got a bunch of stuff piled up, behind the counter there, and I noticed there's a little shelf in the back there that's got VHS on it, and I'm like, is that stuff for sale, the VHS? And she's like, yeah. She said, but I don't hardly ever put them things out. She said, nobody ever wants to buy them. And I'm like, well, I like to look at them. I buy them. And she was like, really? Like, yeah, like she was shocked that I wanted to look at them. And I was like, yeah, I like to look at them because you just never know what you find wherever you go. You could find something really rare. And she just thought that was crazy. She said, I was thinking about just throwing them out, but she had a lot of random stuff, and it really wasn't nothing special. I don't even think I bought one there. And she was like, I don't know, maybe $1 a piece if you find anything, or I'll cut you a deal on all of them or something. So I was like, okay.
I have an antique store like right down the street from me, and they opened up maybe about a year ago now, maybe a little bit more. And when I first went in there, they had like one shelf of maybe 10 tapes. And so I got excited because it was another store that was selling VHS, and they were like $1 a piece or whatever. And they were like all horror. So I bought like a bunch of them. I pretty much bought them out. And I would go every week or so on like a Saturday morning, and they'd always put out more. And eventually they started adding more and more and more because, I was buying them, and I guess a few other people were. And now they literally have like a room just stacked with shelves and shelves of VHS. So it's pretty cool because it's up until this whole COVID thing, I was going every Saturday and seeing what was new that they put out, and they're going to be opening up again, I think, this weekend. So that'll be my weekend routine again. Stop by there and see what they got.
Cut boxes, yes or no?
I try to avoid them if I can. Obviously, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on cut boxes. If it's something like super rare and I'm not going to find another copy, I might buy one just to hold me over until I find, a full box. But it's not something I actively look for. If I see one in at Goodwill or whatever, and it's a quarter, 50 cents, and it's something rare, then yeah, I might buy it. But other than that, and also what I'll do with cut boxes, I'll take them out of the clamshells, and I usually put them in like a plastic sleeve, the clear plastic. So they sort of display better. They look like they're not a cut box.
I never thought about doing that. I actually have them cases too, and I've got a lot of them that I haven't got on. Just put them on certain ones, and I never thought about doing that. But I was just always turned off by cut boxes. I've seen people have them, and I was just like, God, why do people do that? Or why did they do it? But the video stores mainly did it,
I know. It drives me crazy. It does drive me crazy a bit when I look at them with the rest of the tapes, but like I said, putting them in the plastic, it does help because they don't really look like they're cut boxes. Just knowing it still bothers me though. If I find like a copy that's in a full box, I would definitely buy it to upgrade.
This goes on to the next one I was getting ready to say. I found a Gorgon video one time, and it was a movie. I'm trying to remember what it was now. Can't remember it right off. I'll probably remember it after I get off here. I think it was called Death Watch, maybe.
Okay.
I believe. Something like that. But anyway, it was they come in clamshells back then. And somebody cut it to make it fit in a smaller clamshell, and it drove me nuts.
Yeah. I hate that. That drives me crazy too.
And I thought it was the real deal for a minute. And I'm thinking this movie's $40, $50 online, and here they cut it and did that. And I'm like, why did they cut it even more?
And then you notice like a word is cut off, and you realize, oh no, they cut this thing. The worst part about the cut boxes is that they could have cut the boxes in a way that they could have been put back together. You can just kind of fold over the sides and stuff if you really needed to do it. And then that way you can just refold the box. But for some reason, they need to cut the thing up into pieces, and it's crazy.
Going back to the old mom pop shops and other places like that back in the day, they did that, just put them on the shelves. And I just remember the very first video store I went in had a lot of clamshells and big boxes. And we haven't talked about big boxes, but the favorite big boxes, it's got to be Wizard with the artwork. But then when they re-released a lot of them here the last few years, it's kind of hard to tell if you're getting the real deal or not. There's certain things you got to look for.
Exactly.
But I've got a few of them too that was actually just gave to me. So I mean, it's free. I'm going to take it. Of Zombie and I Spit on Your Grave is two of the re-releases, and they still look cool to be mint like that because they're really hard to find that good of a shape. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially the big boxes. So, what's your favorite? You got a favorite like label to collect? Like I was talking about the Gorgon video and stuff.
I mean, I like collecting horror films that were released by sort of one and done labels. So basically, almost it's not even like a label. It's some of these small labels released like 1 or 2 horror films, and then that was it.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of like looking for stuff like that. But then obviously, when it comes to cover art, Vestron had some great releases with the cover art, like Curtains and Mortuary, like we talked about, and Vestron seemed to have like these odd, simple artwork, but it works so well. Like again, like that Curtains with like the image of the old lady mask with the doll, or Sweet 16 that just has that image of Melissa and like the knife or whatever. There's these certain images from Vestron tapes that I really like, that I grew up seeing, and I collect a lot of those.
Yeah, they're Vestron and Lightning videos, stuff like that. I mean, they had all kinds of labels back then, and they just put out some of them. And then I've seen some where they only put out a few. If you watch Adjust Your Tracking, you'll hear about a lot of stuff like that, where somebody just put out 1 or 2 tapes or whatever. I think it's is it called Midnight Video that they only put out like 9 or 10, didn't they? Yeah, and they're really hard to find. I've never had one of them. You got any of them in your collection?
I'm not sure, actually. I'd have to go and look.
Most of them, I think, are big boxes, I believe, ain't they? The Midnight Videos.
Yeah.
You're sitting there trying to look at them now?
I'm trying to think. My VHS room is upstairs.
Oh, okay. You got a VHS room. I have a movie/toy room. This man has a VHS room, just the VHS.
Pretty much, yeah. It started as my retro room, and now it's pretty much overtaken by VHS things. So.
That's cool. But that's all the stuff I really had to talk to you about, asking question-wise, and I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to bring up on the show here to talk about VHS.
No, I mean, it was a lot of the same stuff. Again, it was just another thing I love is we already talked about was those covers, and it's funny because there's all these rare horror movies out there, but some of my favorite covers, and I know you probably agree because I know they're your favorites, is the Friday the 13th set. It's like one of my favorite VHS sets in my collection, and obviously they're these common mainstream slashers that everybody has seen, but I absolutely love the original cover art on those Friday the 13th films. I remember just going in the video store and looking at all of them side by side, and I don't know, just something about looking at them all together that just brings me that sense of joy,
Yeah, now you just have box sets. They don't hardly ever release them by themselves. If they do, you don't hardly see them that much, but you see people with box sets, and I understand that because people want to save space if they are a collector, and people will buy. I have a DVD set of Friday the 13th too, but it's just the originals. I put mine in squeeze and shake cases, and they're not really rare or anything. But more and more you think about it, you don't, or at least where I live, you don't never come across Friday the 13th that often at a Goodwill or a thrift store hardly.
Yeah, it actually seems like they are getting rarer. It seems that a lot of other people are starting to want those. Over the last almost year now, I'd say they've been getting a little bit pricier. I notice online. And you're right, I don't see them really in any stores. I picked up a couple at the antique store I mentioned, but they kind of just put them out because they were just, again, trying to get rid of tapes that they had, I guess. And I bought a few there, and I have not seen any in the wild since. I mean, they come up online, and I noticed even on eBay they're getting kind of expensive. Yeah,
man, I've seen people have the whole sets and selling them for whatever. Sometimes even more. It just depends on eBay because some people think they got gold sometimes, and they put anything on. I'm looking right now. This is not VHS or anything, but I do have the first 4 on CED.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't think I'll ever get rid of. I got lucky and found them for $2 a piece.
That's awesome. And that's something I would grab too if I.
Yeah, to my knowledge, looking up online, I've only seen the first 5, and I think that was all they made because the CEDs kind of went out around probably.
Yeah, I think so.
So I need part 5, and that's the one that seems to be pricey online usually. And but one day maybe I'll come across it. My buddy Scott had them, and he traded them to me a few years back. Well, it was like I said, $2 a piece basically, and I think I threw in something else or whatever. But yeah, they're really cool. And I thought about collecting them things before, and I was like, no, I just want them. Them are cool. That's Friday 13th. That's my favorite. I don't need to get into that stuff because them bad boys, when you stack them up and have a ton of them, they're heavy as hell.
They are, I know. They are.
But I have seen people with a lot of horror ones, and I've looked at them and I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but nah, I don't have no room for them. And if I can't really watch them, they're just gonna sit there. So I said just 4 of them's good. Maybe the 5th one if I ever find it, but I'm not trying to get into finding a lot of other horror ones. Maybe if I can grab a big bulk and flip them and sell them, somebody would want them or whatever, or trade for VHS or something maybe. But I don't know anybody. A lot of people don't even know what them things are.
True. True.
The first one I ever saw, my dad borrowed actual machine, the CED machine, and pumping iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, and he somehow hooked it up to the VCR back then. That's the cool thing about VCRs. And he dubbed it to a VHS tape so he could keep it, and he borrowed it from his friend, and you could do that back then with that too. I know you can piggyback the VCRs together, but he did it with the CD player too, and I thought that was real cool that he could record it. So.
And that's a good point too. VCRs, I think people forget how important VCRs were, not just for watching movies, but even video game systems.
Yeah.
Like so many video game systems, you'd hook up to the VCR, to connect to the TV, and it's just funny when you think about that. I remember, pressing the power button on the VCR to turn on my Nintendo.
And just recording, blank tapes. You can buy them and you can record stuff off of TV. It's pretty cool. I got a friend that still has Super Bowl 20 where the Chicago Bears won, still recorded on VHS that he recorded when he was a kid.
Yep.
So, the Patriots. So that's funny. I was just mentioning that. That was way before, all this other stuff. But I never thought they would come to win all the Super Bowls after that. But I thought they was one and done there forever. But that's funny. And the very first one I ever remember, my dad rented from that Adventureland video I was telling you about. We didn't even have a VCR because VCRs were like $700 or $800 at the time when it first came out, and you could rent the actual VCR, and bring it home. And it was in a box. It was almost like in one of these things where you see your pizza man bring your pizza, and you could hold it like that. You could undo it and you slide the VCR out. And he brought that thing home. And I was amazed. I didn't know what he was doing. He's hooking up to a TV, and there was a tape stuck in it. And I'll never forget that. It was the very first tape that I ever remember. I don't even remember what he rented, but this tape, somebody had copied other movies from that video store, and they just left their tape in there. And it had Police Academy on it. It had Police Academy. It had First Blood. And it had Texas Chainsaw on it.
Wow.
And I think there was 4 movies. I can't really remember. Oh, Missing in Action. That was it.
That's awesome.
So it had all 4 of them. And these people was to the extreme. They had the FBI warning at the beginning they recorded. They even recorded all the credits. I mean, we kept that tape. And I remember the store calling him and asking him, did they find a tape in there or whatever? And we just said, no, we didn't find no tape. We kept that tape, and I had that tape for years. It'd be cool to still have that tape. That was the first one I remember, anything where you could record. I just thought that was the world then. It's so weird now, 30, 40 years later almost, all the stuff that you can do and watch movies on your phone and everything. It's just crazy.
I remember getting the WWF pay-per-views and taping all of those every time they came on, so that way I'd have them in my collection.
Yeah, that's cool too. Yeah, because they're hard to find. Maybe on DVD. I know for some reason they're crazy out of print stuff, and it's just
Yep.
you know, in VHS. I don't know about VHS. I haven't really looked them up, but I was on my
Plus
quest
they
to.
blur out every time they say WWF. They
Yeah,
fade out and
you
stuff.
don't get the real deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But back then, I remember recording some of the Saturday night main events. I'd love them,
Yep.
so I had a lot of them on tape still. Wish I could have still had, but
Oh yeah, I had tapes and tapes of Monday Night Raws.
Yeah.
I used to tape it every week just because.
But I guess that's it for the season finale with the Horror Man here, talking VHS, because you're one of the probably biggest VHS collectors that I know and literally talk to. There is some other ones I watch online that I'm amazed to see their collection, and I don't know.
Oh, I know.
One of them's K&J Horror. He was the first one that
Absolutely.
I remember seeing, and it's just unreal what that guy has.
I've purchased so many tapes just from watching his videos and saying, okay, I need that, I need that, I need that.
Well, I used to actually watch these videos and have a piece of paper and a pen nearby and write down these names of some of them and look them up. And there was a lot that I couldn't even find on eBay and stuff. They were so rare. And I'm like, good Lord, we'll cross that one out for a minute because it might be pretty pricey. But where does he find this stuff? And he's just down south from me. I think he was somewhere in North Carolina. But
And I know he used to kind of get them before everybody got back into VHS, it seems. So it was like he was just, it was the right timing, you know?
Yeah. And he's been at, I remember when one of his first videos I watched before he was even on Adjust Your Tracking, he talked about collecting since he was a kid, and the very first ones that he remembers buying was, of course, Friday the 13th.
Yep.
He bought one, and then he said next week he went back and bought part two, and then he went and done that. So, yeah, but it's cool talking VHS with you, man. I know I had to have you on the show again, and maybe season 2 sometime this summer. Summer's right around the corner, hopefully it'll quit raining here. And we'll do another show, something similar to this, and talking about some movie or some other format that you get excited for, but nothing like VHS. It's that's the old school.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, definitely.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk beta. Do you have any Betamax play?
I got a couple. I don't have a player, but I have a couple beta.
I never got into that, but my buddy, I had a buddy have one when I was a kid, and for some reason, the only thing that they had he actually had, I don't know how he had it, but he had a porno on it on the beta player, yeah. And I'm like, these things are really small. These the tapes, and I was really confused for a minute. I'm like, what happened to your VHS? I was like, this is half the size. I just thought it was crazy, but yeah, them are hard. They're super hard to find anywhere in my area.
Yeah, same here. I find a couple every now and then, but they're usually movies that I would never buy anyway.
Yeah, probably not. And I didn't want to open up a new can of worms on that either. I was like, nah, just forget it. In case it was something, maybe if I could find one of the Friday the 13th on it, if I found one, I'd probably buy it just to set it on the shelf. I did have the making of Thriller one time. Somebody sent me, and I ended up trading it to somebody else for something else, but it was pretty cool. I had it on the shelf for a while.
Nice. Yeah, I got that one on VHS.
Yeah. I'm looking for that one, so if you ever find me one, let me know.
All right.
Snatch it up, do a trade, I'll buy it off of you something. But thanks for being on Friday Night Frights, and we'll catch you next season, and hopefully we'll talk about, well, we might have a part 2 to this, who knows. Might be too long for some people to watch, but some people really get into this stuff, so maybe we can get some views off of this.
Absolutely.
All right, Horror Man, we'll talk to you later. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot. You too.